about 60 attendees who are joining. Others can join as they wish, but we're a few minutes over now, so let's get started here. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for the panelists for accepting this invite late last night. I think it was around 8 or 9 p.m. My time when I started texting a few of you and emailing you. Obviously, we're doing this because of the breaking news that we learned of yesterday afternoon. So thanks to the panelists for joining. I'll let each of them introduce themselves, and thanks for all the attendees. We're also recording this, so we'll have a replay that's available, and our respective marketing teams, I'm sure, will be chopping it up and having some shorts for people to listen to. But let's get started here. We'll spend just a few minutes doing some quick intros, and then just kind of get into the hot topic and the news du jour of what's happening with de minimis. And then we'll leave a few minutes at the end for audience Q&As. So if you do have any questions throughout any of the attendees, feel free to put in the chat right at the bottom there, kind of in the bottom center there of Zoom. Hit the chat. You should be able to put in any questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can, with the final few minutes. But without further ado, let's start with some intros. Maybe we'll go, Brian, Alex, Aaron, Justin, and Casey. That's just the order on my screen here. So Brian, why don't you share a little bit about who you are and your company?
Absolutely. Brian Bourke, Chief Commercial Officer at SEKO Logistics, based here and coming to you live from Chicago, where our global headquarters is. We are a freight forwarder and 3PL, so we support brands with international e-commerce, import and export solutions, including parcel, as well as fulfillment globally and here in the United States. Recently got back from a trip to Mexico, which, wish I would have known a few things when I went, but happy to have this dialogue and discussion to help understand, what's happening in real time. So thanks for having me.
All right, thanks, Brian. Hey, everybody. My name is Alex Yancher. I'm the founder and CEO of Passport. We're an end-to-end internationalization solution. We help brands go global with a cross-border DDU and DDP service, and we also help brands domicile their inventory locally. We call it our in-country enablement solution. Thanks for having me on this, Matt. Excited to talk about it.
Hey. So my name is Aaron Rubin, CEO and founder of ShipHero. We provide software for warehouses. I'm scrolling the attendee list, and I see a bunch of 3PL owners on here who are using our software. So most of the people using our software are third-party logistics companies in the United States, as well as brands that fulfill their own shipments. I think, Justin, you're next.
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everybody. I'm Justin Sherlock. I lead a software startup called Caspian. We help brands and manufacturers and customs brokers audit their trade data and apply for refunds on customs duties and tariffs. Super happy to be here and chat with you all.
I'll wrap it up. Casey Armstrong, CMO over here at ShipBob. We're a global fulfillment solution. We've got 60 plus fulfillment centers all over the world, and I know there have been a lot of crazy changes this year, starting from, MX and then tariff and de minimis, back in 2024. So we've, helped some big brands move over pretty quickly with some of these crazy changes, and happy to help along with everybody else on the panel. Thanks for having us, Matt.
Amazing. So truly the all-stars here. I didn't just say that. I meant that. We got a couple 3PLs, a couple 3PL tech companies, freight forwarders, carriers. So really excited for this conversation. So thanks, guys. And thanks to all the attendees here. Let's get into things. We don't have to waste any time. Like, what's going on with de minimis? Looks like yesterday the executive order, I think that's the technical term, that Trump issued, my read on it was that it essentially said in 30 days from yesterday, August 29th, I believe, is the day, any order of any value, over 0 cents from any country entering the US will no longer be able to be cleared duty-free. Previously, my understanding was that was only exempt from China. Made in China goods were no longer able to enter the US duty-free. I think that was as of early May. Now it seems like it's every country, every value. I guess the first question right at the top of the bat, is that a fair understanding? Like, is de minimis like over, like completely over? I thought, it sounded like we had maybe 2 more years of the good times as of a month ago, but it sounds like things may have changed. So, we can go around the horn, or if someone just wants to take that, share what they're seeing. I know Alex and Aaron, and frankly, everyone on this call have been really having great resources, particularly on LinkedIn and Twitter. So, yeah, what's happening as of yesterday?
Well, I'll jump in because I think for all of us in the international e-commerce community that followed all of the various pieces of legislation ever since the Blumenthal Amendment up until the big beautiful bill, recognize that despite the fact that there was a date in the future 2 years from now with an expiration, I think all of us were under the assumption that there would be some other kind of communication via executive order that would end de minimis earlier, based on previous executive orders. So I think we were all under that kind of assumption that was going to end before the 2 years. The timing of that, was definitely dependent on speculation, but here we are. It's official. But like most of the executive orders, though, it is important to look at the fine print. So is it over? Nothing's really over until, we get guidance from US Customs, right? So I think if you look at the very bottom of the executive order, where it talks about, when systems are ready for the postal channel, I think that is, potentially an area of conversation and discussion. But non-postal certainly we're coming to an end for de minimis getting into the United States.
Yeah, on the postal in that section, because I had posted yesterday saying that I thought it was a typo or a mistake, which I was rereading it this morning and I changed my mind. So I think I understand it better now. I'm happy to jump in. I know it's super in the weeds, but if helpful, Matt, you want me to jump in and explain what I think that means?
Sorry, I was on
The
mute. Yes,
context?
please. Yeah, please do. Aaron.
So the context is, I might be getting this slightly wrong, but I think it was section. So there's a fact sheet, and then there's the actual EO, the executive order, which is, I don't think is in the Federal Register yet, so it's kind of not official, but let's assume it is. There was a whole explanation of what happens for international postal. So for non-international postal, which is FedEx, UPS, all the private carriers, it's over. And there's well, for international postal, and which over means you have to pay regular customs and duties. Postal Service is not able to handle that. So there was a different rule in place which said you have to just pay the new tariffs, the EPA tariffs, or a fixed amount. We can get into that. And then at the very end, that was section 2 or something. And then section 6 or something said, oh, and you can still do de minimis until systems are ready. So I was well, that directly contradicts the above. So clearly that was a mistake. I actually don't think that was a mistake. I think section 2 says you still get to use de minimis, but you have to pay the EPA tariffs. So that's still considered de minimis. And then what section 6 says is when systems are ready for US Postal Service to get real coverage of what the tariff should be, because EPA tariffs are the simple, hey, 30% on China. But it doesn't have it's 18 additional percent if this is a fabric made of a woven material, right? All the normal tariffs that predate these new Trump tariffs are charged. So when Brian's company imports goods, they have to look at all the details on all the items and then calculate everything. And Postal's not ready to do that. So what I believe the EO says is that in the short term, if you go through Postal, you just pay the EPA tariffs. You can ignore all the more complex pre-existing tariffs, which is a pretty big discount. But that's only until systems ready. When systems ready, Postal is going to be the same as commercial, which is you pay full tariffs for all the different complexity around it. So be curious other people's read on it because it's not 100% clear, but that's my take after having the
Yeah.
coffee this morning.
Yeah, I could jump in with a few other nuanced observations around this. So first of all, there was a difference in how shipments were treated coming out of China, given postal versus commercial. And it was so complicated and confusing that China Post and Hong Kong Post basically decided not to ship anything to the US. So I kind of expect that to happen, at least for a period of time, irrespective of there being a slight advantage for postal because you're only being charged the IEEPA tariffs. So that's likely what's going to happen. There's some other practical questions that still need to be answered. So just taking a step back. So postal shipments go through what's called postal clearance. And postal clearance is governed by this intergovernmental organization called the UPU, United Postal Union, which is like a UN organization. So, and that's the organization that designates the forms that need to be filled out for shipments. So really up until now, you didn't even have to put the country of origin into that document. So how could you possibly charge even the IEEPA tariffs if you're not required to put the country of origin? So that's changing. So you could see that in the executive order, they're mandating the country of origin for postal. But these are documents that, don't take 30 days to change. I mean, it takes a really long time to change. So they also have this other line in there, Aaron, I think you probably caught this, where it was like, you can either do the IEEPA or you can do like $80 or something like that for the shipment, which is just like crazy expensive. And then I think it's like $160.
I think it's per item, actually, not per shipment, which.
Yeah, right. Good point. Per item. So, I mean, $80 per item. I mean, it's just like not practical. Another thing that they're trying to do there is they're trying to put the onus on the posts, the foreign posts, to collect the funds on behalf of CBP, rather than kind of the more traditional method of DDU shipping, delivered duties unpaid, of the postal operator holding the package, sending a note to the customer, requiring payment, having the customer come into the post office. This happens every day with Canada Post. They'll hold the package, they'll send you a note at your door, you come in, you pay it. So they're throwing that in there. And one last thing, Tyler in the Q&A asked a question about IEEPA and how, ironically, there's a court hearing about it today. So they actually addressed that to a certain extent in this executive order as well. IEEPA, by the way, is International Emergency Economic Powers Act. So this is the legal framework under which Trump is imposing these tariffs. And you see in this executive order, there's a lot of talk about fentanyl and all that. So trying to put the breadcrumbs in place for that court case to go the administration's way. But that executive order basically implies that that companies, or that in theory it can go away if this court case doesn't go their way. But they put in language in there that implies that if they put the tariffs under a different legal structure, all the changes that they're putting in place here still apply. So even if the court case doesn't go Trump's way, they have other methods and means by which to impose tariffs, and the de minimis is still going to be, inactive for those new tariffs. So they've already put in some of those considerations into that executive order.
Yeah, in fact, I'll go even deeper on that. So for the IEEPA, and the very real possibility that higher courts agree with the three panel judges of the Court of International Trade, which basically said the executive branch does not have authorization to impose tariffs per the IEEPA Act, then the administration is just going to come on top and throw some other provision So we've seen 301, 201, 232. Well, there's also 122. So to your point, Alex, that even if for those of you that are scenario planning all of this for your supply chains and companies, IEPA going away and you getting refunds, that is definitely in the cards as a possibility. But tariffs going away completely in the next couple of years, I would not put that in the cards or the scenario. So yeah, regardless of what provisions are being used, I think the only area that I think will be interesting though is when we do talk about provisions, one of the, we'll call it nuances of the new postal channel, I guess we'll call it regulations, are the fact that it does specifically say only the IEPA tariff. And so, for certain commodities, let's say potentially apparel, it actually could be a very interesting channel for you to still get into the United States, because you'd rather just pay the IEPA tariff, depending on your country of origin, versus stacking everything together, which is what everyone else does or has to do with any other kind of entry into the United States, either B2B or B2C parcels. So definitely understanding the provisions following the court case today. It's going to be a very interesting week for U.S. Customs for all of us, but I think that's a very good point, Alex. This is knowing the difference between IEPA and the other provisions is important, but I wouldn't get caught up in, let's say IEPA goes away. Does that house of cards of de minimis also fall down? No, probably not.
Yeah, and to jump in, because again, those insights are obviously incredibly helpful to get into the weeds of like what are the nuances and how much you're gonna have to pay for each of your product lines and how do you classify those. But zooming out, even during the prior president's administration, they were starting to chip away at de minimis, and obviously the Trump administration has been taking pretty swift action. And so I think when you ask the question, is it gone? And we can debate on the timeline and how we're gonna, how brands are gonna navigate these. I think for the foreseeable future, they're gone. And especially once these get through and the government starts generating revenue off of this, like they have on the tariffs, that's a really tough thing to reverse as well. And so I think that the brands need to just assume these are gone, and then start taking action. We've worked with a lot of brands that have had to move over very quickly because of a lot of the rules with China and Hong Kong, and that's where they're manufacturing. And a lot have tried to move over to other countries like Vietnam or Indonesia, and to buy some time. And then there was a lot of the news, of course, for mid 2027. Again, that's gone. So I think maybe glass half full, the news came today versus later this year. And some brands can actually maybe navigate some of these crazy changes while they need to get inventory in before peak season. And so my assumption is, and from talking to a lot of brands, even yesterday after the news broke, that's the focus is peak season 2025. And then, of course, figuring out 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, on that note, Casey, and I know Aaron, you own warehouses too with your LVK business. Obviously, SEKO Logistics is in the e-commerce fulfillment business as well. I'm curious your thoughts on how impactful this change will be. I believe I read in the executive order that I know this was currently or earlier this year, pre China or inclusive of China or otherwise, but order of magnitude 4 million daily shipments enter the United States via de minimis. So quick math, let's just call it 1 billion shipments a year, 1 billion with a B. So it's a lot, right? I'm trying to think like, what's going to happen with these shipments? Will these shipments be no longer? Will these companies or brands or platforms that represented shares of that billion, will they just stop doing business with the United States? Will they continue to be shipped from whichever country they were shipping from, Europe, Asia, Australia, UK, elsewhere? Or will that product be now that the de minimis, I'll call it a loophole, for lack of a better word, is no longer, effective 30 days from now, will that product be shipped to the United States, freight forwarded to the United States, ocean or air, sent to a United States warehouse, either their own or a 3PL, like a ShipBob, or a SEKO or an LVK Logistics, and be fulfilled domestically like many brands do already. I'm curious, like, what this change of this billion shipments a year, like, is this going to be should US 3PLs, will they see this like growth of X%? I think Aaron, you may have said in a tweet yesterday that, it'll boost, I don't know, I think you said maybe 7%, on a really big number, right? Yeah, curious, Aaron, what you, or Casey, I see both of you unmuted. Curious what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I know Casey's company. Well, the easiest thing to do is look at the past, right? So when the China 321, well, when China was exempted or removed from eligibility for 321, I know Casey's company, ShipBob, signed some pretty big companies that had previously taken advantage of 321 and moved into their domestic warehouses. And I think that's the case for a lot of the industry. We saw that. I don't know, again, Casey wants to necessarily say who those were, but the people in the industry are all aware that there were a lot of, or several big brands that moved onshore and some that didn't because they had manufacturing in countries like Vietnam, or there's just so much uncertainty, they just didn't know what to do. And they just kind of like maybe initially rushed, then decide, hey, something, let's just wait, see what happens. Maybe it's going to come back. Who knows? So I would expect the same to happen now. There'll be some brands that will move into the US. It doesn't make sense for everyone. It's not going to end the direct from China model because there's some people that have real fast fashion and they're manufacturing those goods like in real time, basically in China or Vietnam and other places. And um, that supply chain makes sense, not for only tariff reasons, but for cash flow reasons, but also just speed, right? The real fast fashion. They're producing basically like weekly new SKUs. So that's not going to move, but a lot of the other ones, more traditional ones that use 321, that ship from overseas just to take advantage of tariffs, that's over. And, just to echo what everyone said about like, for multiple reasons, like, I don't think the lawsuit matters. It matters a lot for tariffs. I don't think it matters for de minimis. Like de minimis is going to be gone regardless of the outcome of that lawsuit.
Yeah, agreed with Aaron, where like just when some of the tariff and de minimis news was breaking earlier, I know some people were like, well, taking these, from my view, kind of wild stances of, well, now these countries or these businesses are going to stop doing business with the US, and that just it's just a math equation. Like, look at the consumer base and the revenue potential. Like, that's never ever going to happen. And so I think these brands, again, like Aaron mentioned, they're going to have to move things onshore. And again, just like how I think COVID got a lot of these brands. I think the brands, what's fortunate is, and a lot of it is through probably pain. The brands that are now alive today, they've been through so much. There's such stronger businesses. And so again, from the craziness of COVID with understanding supply chain to coming out of COVID and some of the iOS changes, having to understand marketing and their P&L much better, to the latest changes with having to really understand, I think, their inventory at a whole nother level. It's just going to make these brands even stronger for the long term, even though there might be some short-term pain. And so again, they're going to have to navigate that well and understand just the the global landscape much better as well. So actually, Alex and I were chatting yesterday, and we've seen this firsthand, and I know Alex has as well. And we've partnered on some of this, where these brands will just take a closer eye on where are their end consumers from a global perspective. And if they are doing a lot of volume in the EU or the UK, are they going to start storing their inventory in region and selling things in Europe or in Australia or elsewhere, versus a lot of brands were just storing and shipping everything from the United States, and so anyways, there's brands I think are just gonna get more granular in just how they go about storing their inventory from a global perspective as well.
Justin, I'm curious with your business. I also saw you just recently raised some capital, so congrats there. Um,
Thank you.
you go to your website, and the first thing I see is meetcaspian.com. For those on the call, the first thing I see is more cash from duty refunds. So that's you're like the pretty boy at the high school prom, right? Or maybe not, maybe, right? Um,
I think certainly there's a great question here around, who are the winners and of some of this chaos, and like, some of the technology providers that are helping brands navigate this are certainly, like, we're benefiting, but I want to be very clear that, like, that it is a really difficult time, even for the tech platforms to stay up to date with all these changes. I think the points that I had are more related to the systems and the tariff changes. I think, like, the insights here from the group on parcel delivery and cross-border fulfillment is extremely enlightening. But the systems of evolution that I think we're going to see inside of customs, and the need for all of the service providers in the space to have a good understanding of classification is really going to be a major change from this from de minimis going away. So yeah, I think the one of the things that has been really incredible to witness over the past year is the change in just inside of CBP and their adoption of AI. And when, I was starting Caspian a year and a half ago, talking to officers every day about our approach and how we were using AI, and there's a ton of scrutiny about it. And now I think those same officers are saying, look at what Doge has done to automate some of our work. And certainly on the enforcement side of the house, they're heavily adopting AI. But I think just for the just to deal with this entry volume that's going to come from de minimis going away, there's going to be a really big tech lift that needs to happen in short order on the customs inside of CBP. Never mind in the brokerage and 3PL world. So yeah, those are really I think some of the big changes that I expect to happen in the next several months, and they've already been happening. And then, yeah, the classification is something we haven't really talked about yet in the call, but certainly now with with informal entries being required for low value shipments, I think classification is it's not something that we do right now, but there are a ton of great providers out there that can really help do classification in an accurate and low cost way. And I think those businesses are going to be in very high demand right now for their services.
That's great. I'm curious, kind of on the topic of, loopholes. I know the news is still fresh, and as you mentioned, Aaron, it's not yet in the Federal Register, so it's not yet official. Any like speculation on new loopholes? I mean, they always pop up, right? I mean, it's called a loophole for a reason, right? Generally short-term oriented, and not to say that de minimis was a loophole, but
Thank you, Matt. It was not a loophole. I just have to say that U.S. customs trade policy.
Yeah.
That's my soapbox, and I'm never going to get off that one. But to your point, it's there are always ways. I think there are always ways. With the comments made earlier, like, people will still ship from China into the U.S. That's still going to happen. People will leverage U.S. trade policy to their advantage. Supply chains are like water. They're gonna just find the easiest paths of entry. And there's, with this shifting environment, it's creating a lot of interesting scenarios in real time. But yeah, sorry, I just had to say it's not a loophole. I know some people disagree, but that's my position. I'm sticking to it.
Alex, you may have mentioned this earlier, but like, how is this actually going to work, right? So let's just take like a very basic case, right? I have a friend who lives in the UK. Uh, uh, he's a good friend, so he sends me a birthday gift every year. Let's say my birthday is September 5th, right? It's in June 7th for all those on the call that wish to send me something. But let's say it's September 5th, right after the 30-day deadline. And the gift is $100, right? And let's just say for simplicity, it was made in the UK. And they sent it to me here in Nashville. Like, what's what's going to happen with that shipment? What are the options that the shipper has? And yeah, like how's it going to work in practice? And let's just say it ships UPS or FedEx. Like, can you sort
Yeah,
of walk through like the cash flows of tariffs and what is that tariff rate? Who pays it? Just sort of at a high level.
yeah, sure. So, uh, small caveat, I'm not sure what the deal is with gifts, like literally a gift. There may be a way to mark something as a gift and avoid tariffs, and there might still be a de minimis for that. But putting that aside, assuming that it's actually a commercial shipment, and UPS, FedEx, those are commercial shippers, so it's going to go through a private clearance process. So there will be stacking on the tariffs. Remember, we mentioned earlier that for Postal, this is a small, I wouldn't call it a loophole, but just a small gimme for Postal. I think they implemented this for practical purposes, but you're only going to be assessed the IEEPA tariffs. So for UK, I think it's 15%, if I'm not mistaken. So that's so it'd be 15%. So if you send it through Royal Mail, which is the local postal operator in UK, or your friend sent it through Royal Mail, um, they presumably would be charged $15 on top of that 100, right? So 15%. For commercial clearance, they're stacking. So there's the 15% IEEPA, and then there might be the other tariffs depending on the commodity that they're shipping. And technically, the importer of record, okay, is the designated party that has to do the clearance and pay that tariff. So there's a little bit of this semantic gamesmanship that's been playing out in the political spheres and whatever of who pays the tariffs. Um, at the end of the day, it's the import of record, and for all practical purposes, that's the D2C brand. That's the e-commerce brand that's importing the good. Is the import of record. You can play some games around who you designate and what have you to maybe this is another interesting topic for this group to talk about, but what is the declared value? Let's say your friend uh, uh, had it manufactured for $15, but decides to sell it out on Etsy or whatever for 100. Is he allowed to declare $15, or does he have to declare the $100 that was on the site? So there's been some interesting structures being discussed right now around having a entity in the U.S. that purchases it at a lower price and then resells it to the end consumer. So this is rife with potential for loopholes, and still a little bit of gray, but that's basically how it works, Matt.
Just on that point, so Brian perked up. I think one of the bigger providers of that service, which is not a loophole, and I don't think it's gray. I think it's pretty well understood to be there's rules about how to do it, and it's totally implementable. You do not have to pay the final cost. There's systems, but I think I'll just turn that over to Brian to answer on that, and maybe certainly the person to speak to if you're a company that is importing directly from overseas and needs to pay the lower price on it. It's legal. You just got to work with the right people. Brian's one of those. In terms of like gift, my understanding is the only exception for gift now is like if you're literally carrying it yourself, like on a plane or
Mm.
over the border. But that like a shipment of a gift, I think is still going to be subject to tariffs now.
I can only imagine if your friend in the UK, let's say his name is Jack, and they decide not to use Royal Mail, like are they going to be calculating what the value of steel and aluminum is in this gift, and then adding that to the form. This is going to create a lot of interesting scenarios for sure. I think, Scott Lincecum is a big advocate of kind of, just general free trade globally, and he always is hyping about how tariffs never really truly help with actually achieving the stated policy goals of said tariffs. I think you can say the same with de minimis. I think there will be scenarios and unintended consequences and impacts that were not intended or are a byproduct of all of these shifting landscapes. Because now with de minimis ending for all countries, China looks a lot more interesting now for a lot of companies, a lot more interesting. And so like these things are all shifting in real time. And I wouldn't call them loopholes, but it is going to create some very interesting paths that maybe people did not consider or they had written off earlier in the year. But I do look forward to the day when everyone's trying to figure out, when they're sending gifts to their family overseas or to the US from another country, what the value of the steel and aluminum is in that gift. I mean, that's just, I don't know how that's going to happen at scale, but we'll
Just
see.
send gift cards.
Yeah,
Just send the gift card. Way easier.
On the topic of loopholes, because what our core product is duty drawback, which is a refund for duties that you've paid when you've re-exported a product. And we get asked this question all the time, like, is your whole business a loophole? And I think like the Section 321 fulfillment companies had been asked that same question for a while. I think on the cross-border fulfillment piece, like there's still clearly a value on just delaying paying those US import duties if you're fulfilling in a small package, and if you can fulfill the parcel, even if you're paying the duties, you still avoid the working capital hit of paying the duties up front. That's something that I think Izzy from Portless has been saying on webinars over and over. It's it's very real. On drawback, I think the same applies, which is that this is definitely not a loophole. It's part of a bipartisan trade policy to grow U.S. storage, fulfillment, manufacturing, and U.S. brands, and so that'll continue to be available. I haven't actually spoken to a ton of foreign or international brands yet about how they're thinking about this. I think if you have really high return rates, in certain segments, that's going to be a really difficult decision to make on how you fulfill to U.S. customers. If you're making something and you used to be fulfilling via parcel into the U.S. And now the economics of that are changing. But that one of the key levers there again for those types of brands is a duty drawback, where you can get that refund back if you have that return coming back out of the US to the UK or Europe.
You're absolutely right, Kristen. You're absolutely right. Like, we have clients that never even considered duty drawback because they re-exported maybe 5% of their items they imported to the US. And now everyone's looking at it, or if you're not, you should be, because that is, money you're just leaving on the table. I do think, as to your question about international brands, so brands from Australia, from the UK, from Europe, they are at a disadvantage right now. So if you are a US brand, this is an advantage. And the reason why I say that is because I believe it was Casey or maybe Aaron or Alex said it earlier that there's been a lot of resilience over the past 6 years, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you want to call it. And actually, Casey, was you. And that's absolutely true for U.S. companies. A lot of U.S. companies have diversified their sourcing and supply chains, but not the international brands as much. And so they were kind of caught off guard. A lot of them, 99% country of origin China, versus a lot of U.S. brands very much more diversified. And so I think this creates an environment where U.S. brands have kind of a leg up, but that's not going to last long. And the international brands are going to do what they do best, which is figure out how to optimize their supply chain. A lot have already moved their goods into the U.S. to fulfill from the US. A lot more will do that for sure. Some will continue shipping from their origin country, but there are other tariff mitigation strategies. And so you don't have to, if you're shipping your items B2B into the US, into a new US 3PL that you've set up, you don't have to pay the duties when they arrive into the country. You can set up with ACH direct with the US Customs, and you can do periodic monthly statements. So you pay the following month for all the duties of the prior month. And so that and that's not a loophole, that's US trade policy, right? So there are a lot of interesting ways that companies and brands can still weaponize their supply chain, because the good news for everyone is happening to everybody all at once. So, it's a matter of I definitely talked to a lot of brands, and those that are not putting their head in the sand and are making decisions and making moves, I think they're the ones that are going to take advantage and be early movers, especially for this peak season. Act now or forever hold your peace.
I know we have a couple questions in the Q&A. We'll take a couple of them in just a moment. I have one quick question. I also just posted everyone's LinkedIn information in the chat here. Feel free to add those folks, and or reach out to me after, and I'd be happy to connect you with any of them. The quick question I have, because just in the last 12 or 16 hours, it has once again become the most popular question I've gotten, is the question around bonded warehouses. Casey, I'm not sure if ShipBob has any bonded warehouses or, FTZ, free trade zone. I believe SEKO does. I don't believe LVK operates in that space. I know there are 3PL operators on the call who do have that or are interested in that. Any sort of quick thoughts on whether a bonded strategy is helpful given the changes to de minimis? Is that something that brands should once again, aggressively pursue? Is that something that maybe 3PL operators should look into enabling as a service? Any quick thoughts there?
Well, I'll jump on something Brian said just to repeat, which is you don't actually pay duties right when they come in. You shouldn't be if you have any scale. That changes with bonded. So in some cases, it's more expensive. You'll pay more money faster. You'll pay more customs fees as well. In some cases, you'll pay less money later. It really does depend on the velocity of the products. So there's no one size fits all, but just to explain what you get out of it, like you still pay all the full duties. You just pay them when they're shipped to the customer every week, instead of in bulk a month after you receive the goods. So it's like you still paying the duties. It's just a timing issue. And I think, Brian, you probably wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, there are a lot less FTZs in bonded warehouses, at least today, than there are regular fulfillment centers. And so, there's going to be a premium to be able to do this. And if you have a lot of turns on your products and you've kind of been matching demand really well with your supply, there are definitely scenarios when you might want to take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of 3PLs out there that you don't need to necessarily leverage an FTZ or a bonded warehouse. But I will say that, for a lot of brands, FTZs and bonded warehouses are going to be a lot more interesting now. The only catch is, based on the provision, based on which one is viable or not, there are some, rules about like locking in the duty rate when it enters the FTZ, for example. So you got to be really careful because if duty rates are going to be moving around, as they seem to be doing this year, you've got a hedge there that maybe you didn't factor in. But definitely, everything is on the table right now. And but as Aaron said, it won't be a one-size-fits-all solution based on your commodity, based on your average order value, and based on your country of origin. These are going to be three of the big variables that are going to change, where and how you get things set up. And I believe it was said earlier too, we're your customer base. Like, by the way, if you're only selling in the US right now, if this is not a wake-up call for you to expand internationally and not put all your eggs in the US basket, I don't know what is. This is the wake-up call of all wake-up calls. There are companies like Passport and a lot of others that can help you expand internationally. I would definitely be looking into that, because putting all your eggs in the US basket right now is a lot more risk than I think a lot of brands can take going into this peak season.
Here.
I completely agree with that. I have one more point before you go to the Q&A, Matt, which is also that expanding internationally, just where FX is going. US goods are pretty competitive right now, and they're more attractive than they've been in the last several years for foreign consumers. And then on the other on the never-ending news cycle, while we've been speaking, Trump just gave Mexico a 90-day extension on the IEEPA fentanyl tariffs. And, I think if we were to see a lower tariff rate in Mexico, that would still make the cross-border fulfillment out of Mexico into the US potentially interesting. And again, country of origin still matters there, but I think it would definitely mean that a lot of, there's potentially some optimism there, although again, it's just like another wait and see for Mexico now.
Great. Well, let's we just have a few minutes here. So, and I see that my fellow panelists have answered a lot of the questions in real time, which is great. Tyler, you always win the reward for the most questions, and certainly my webinars, which we always appreciate. Hey, Tyler. Looks like there's maybe 3 or 4 unanswered questions here, so maybe we'll take 1 or 2 of these, and if there's any others from the attendees, feel free to drop them in here. Antoine's, I guess it's more of a statement and a question. We know the US-based 3PLs, well, this is my opinion, but also the opinion, I think, of many on this call, that US-based 3PLs will be big winners. So I'm glad that 3 folks on this call representing 3PLs, at least in some part, have a lot of exposure to the US. So that's great. Big fans of SEKO, LVK, and ShipBob. I guess one question here from Vishal. The question is there any possibility for CBP to allow low-value goods customers to pay duties directly without involving a broker? That's a little above my pay grade. So is there someone, one of the panelists?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just gonna say this is where the fine print and all of these executive orders gets really, really interesting. On this one from yesterday, what was really interesting for those that follow the fine prints on these, which is a very small subset of us, of which I think Justin is definitely in that category. They added language. This was just like the Liberation Day tariffs. They used the word and instead of or, and so there was a lot of questions around transshipments and switching ocean carrier vessels and when do the duties and rates apply. Still not, by the way, clarified, so you could still be owed more duties than you paid or get refunds based on how this all plays out. But in this case, for de minimis, what was really interesting is for postal shipments, the previous executive order stated that the carrier needs to ultimately collect the duties. The carrier is, airlines don't do this. I mean, this is like basically, I was just flying yesterday, it'd be like asking the pilot to serve drinks. That's just not what the pilot does. The carriers aren't set up for that. Could they do that? Sure. Are they going to want to do that? Probably not. But in this executive order, it did add the language or other parties if qualified in lieu of such transportation carriers, which again means nothing to any of us because that doesn't actually define things well or clearly enough to actually execute policy, which is why we always wait for guidance from CBP. Literally, we that's where we get the instructions. So we can I guess guess at this point or guesstimate what's going to happen, but I do believe that this is going to enable other companies to help facilitate the payment of duties for postal shipments which will, definitely create some opportunities for brands to collect duties at checkout. Whether you want to call it the tariff line item or not, we'll leave that up to you. We know some are already, because then you can still market your goods based on your sale value. And just like taxes, and shipping, it gets calculated at checkout, right? So, I mean, there's, again, a lot of unintended consequences that are going to happen as a result of these. And every word matters in these executive orders. And so I do think that you're going to have third parties that can help facilitate. And the more exceptions we have here, like on the postal channel, the more interesting paths that are going to be created for a lot of companies. But if anyone can tell me if you get an invoice from SEKO to pay duties on your international postal, I mean, that's not going to happen. U.S. consumers are not like, I mean, even Canadian consumers, Matt, I mean, they're used to it, but they don't like doing it as much anymore. And that DDU was going away before, and I don't think consumers are going to be happy about, paying an invoice from a parcel carrier, so or a postal carrier in this case. So I do think that does create opportunity that did not exist in the previous executive.
Yeah, appreciate that, Brian. Well, yeah, let's unless there's anything, any final comments from any of the panelists, feel free to share. But otherwise, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. As you could probably see from the first 55 minutes here, these are truly all-stars, first ballot logistics Hall of Famers right here. Follow each of them on LinkedIn. Truly, I mean, these are people who I look up to when I'm sending out my newsletter or, answering questions from, partners and customers. I usually go on each of their, LinkedIn streams or Twitter streams to kind of, really understand from a boots on the ground perspective what's happening. So follow each of them on LinkedIn. Work with their companies. They're all operating really great businesses. Yeah, happy to make direct intros, if you can't get to them independently. But thank you guys, Aaron, Alex, Brian, Casey, and Justin. Thanks for joining on such short notice, giving an hour of your time. And thanks to all the attendees for joining. We had a really, really great attendance today. So this call has been recorded. That sounds like a 1-800 number, right? This call has been recorded. The webinar has been recorded. We'll probably send it out in the next day. For those who couldn't make it, we'll send it to the email that you used to register. So thanks everyone, and have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.